My tech talks is late, but then I click on them and there's a submission in there. So I've been ignoring it, but
Have you been losing points?
no, but
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it's something weird during the initial submission. Yeah. Yeah, because usually tech talks, if they show up late, so tech talks and Bible homework, I usually will give 50. Actually, Bible homework, I usually give 50% if it's late, but that's just stupid to turn those in late. The tech talks, I'm usually a little more lenient because I definitely want people to go to those.
Yeah.
Normal homework, though, I typically don't give any credit if they're late because I go over it in class.
Yeah.
So it's that type of thing. But I mean, if a lot of times what I'll do is if somebody had like a major issue that week that prevented them from getting homework done or something like that, I'll just have them submit something with a little note and I'll just count their next assignment twice for the 2 assignments. I mean, for like legitimate reasons, not like, hey, I didn't feel like doing it or I forgot I had homework, like
Mr. Gonzalez stole my computer.
like death in the family, or stuff like that. Yeah, like I have a couple of grad students. I don't know if you guys saw in our prayers this last week. There's a 22-year-old guy who worked up at Acuity. His name was Dan. I think his dad graduated from Concordia here, and his cousin goes to Concordia here. 22 and died. He was in bed and didn't wake up. So I mean, they did. And several of the computer science students who work up at Acuity knew him. Zach Zeman was his roommate at some point, and Maddie Martins was friends with him. They all went to the same church, but it just goes to show you have to take every day. 22. They did an autopsy, and I guess it came back inconclusive, so I'm guessing that stuff is usually some sort of undiagnosed heart defect or something. So I had a buddy from pharmacy, I guess 4 years ago now. His name was Christian Albano, was one of the pharmacy profs, and him and I had started a business together, and he was a little bit older than me, but not by much. He must have been late 40s maybe. And but I had dinner with him the night before, and I'm ordering this, I don't know, fried crap and stuff, and he's getting pan-seared walleye, which is a little bit of lemon juice, no oil, like a fitness freak. He's playing basketball with his kids the next day and had a massive heart attack and died. You just never know. But yeah, so that particular student, or those couple of students in my grad class, that's a legitimate excuse when you have somebody close to you, because homework is probably not something you necessarily are going to have a easy time to focus on in anyways, and probably isn't up there on your priority list. Well, did I tell everybody about my injury the other day?
I heard about it from other
Oh, man. Yeah, so I'll show a quick picture. If blood makes you squeamish, you're going to want to look away. It's not like crazy, but just. All right, so if you notice here, you see this just right of center, this line that goes all the way down. So I was on the 3D printers, and I was cleaning off one of the sheets. And instead of using the scraper, I decided, I'll just kind of get that thing off with my thumb, right? So that's a piece of filament that went all the way through, bottoming out at, I guess, the end of the nail bed or something. And so Dr. Wall was in there, and so was Blade. And so it happened, and I didn't really react, and, damage was done. So you guys have to see this. So I go up to him, and I'm right in Dr. Wall's face. I'm I pull this thing out super slow, like an inch comes out of my nail.
That's nice. Dr. Wall appreciated that.
He did. It was so good.
Actually, now I hear his reaction.
They were like, "How are you just not There's so much filament under my nail."
How much was it?
I don't know the length of my nail. and then it was bent a little bit because I did this with force. Anything worth doing is worth doing right. Filament came off the bed, by the way. I kind of just peeled it off with,
Nailed it.
I nailed it. Yeah.
So did it go between your nail and your finger, or like through your finger?
No, it's between my finger and the nails where it slid in. Yeah, real clean.
It's slightly less gross than I was thinking.
Oh, you were thinking like it like went through my thumb.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know how it would do that.
Yeah, that would be odd. Well, that's really being aggressive. But I actually probably was being that aggressive. I wanted that filament off. So.
Is that purple or is that like
What, this?
what's the,
Oh no, the filament is out now.
well, no, what was the color of the filament?
I don't know, white or gray or something. You know, what you're seeing is the path that it followed. The filament's gone. That's the path that was carved.
Oh, okay. I thought that was the filament.
No, filament's out because the filament was hanging out of my nail here,
Okay.
and then I just grabbed it and pulled it super slow-mo out, right in
got that in
Dr. Wall's face.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So good. You should ask him about it.
I thought you actually had to dig in there and get the filament out.
No. I didn't have to do any. Had a nice, convenient handle.
You should put that in the 3D
I've had
printer
stuff-
camera.
I've had stuff on my job being stuck in my finger too, and it hurts. Skiing it
Yeah,
out.
but the lesson learned there is whenever you're going to take something that's kind of baked onto the filament sheet, use one of those spatula things that come with the printers. You know, we got a lot of printers in there, right? So that means for every one of those printers, we got a spatula. We have a tool specifically made so that doesn't happen.
Yeah, you just
And that tool was, the problem was I was lazy. I probably could have done it by only taking one step to get the spatula.
you're just
Maximum 2 steps.
No. First of all, you're just showing us an example. Like.
No, I was
you know,
being
look at it.
stupid.
You're being a good No, you shouldn't sell yourself short. Come on. Go
Well, no. I have the story now. I'm all about the story. So I'm glad it happened. I'm just saying that now I have the story. I don't need a story. I don't need a repeat of the story.
Okay.
So the use the spatula is the punchline.
Gotcha.
Because it really is amazing how easily filament will just slip right under the thumb. It's like the perfect size.
Yeah.
And it only hurt when it when it bottomed out. That's when it. Although that would have sucked if it would have broken off and I wouldn't have been able to get to it.
You would have to go to the hospital.
I would have just pried the nail off with some needle nose.
After losing all my toenails, that's not fun.
Yeah, but I'm a crazy person. I take pride in that. All right. So let's talk about the homework, and then let's talk about GitHub. And actually, before I forget, because I was going to give this to you last time, I want to get back into the Zyba. Oh yeah, we're going to build one of these. Yeah, so that's a Delta 3D printer. We're going to build one that's like the size of a car. Something like that. And we just got our new giant printer today. You can do 20 inches by 20 inches by 20 inches. So we're going to try to 3D print an enclosure for the Ender 5s in a single go. Just print an enclosure. And then that way we can print ABS on the Ender 5s. It's going to be awesome. But our first test print, of course, is going to be a 20-inch diameter Stargate to complement my no, it is. That's 100% true. to complement my 8-inch Stargate now.
In other words, priorities. Yeah. Gotcha.
And then at some point soon, we're going to build a, because we have all these tools, we keep using them to build bigger things. We're going to build a 3D printer that can print a house. We just have to get some sort of hot end. And they actually are 3D printers already that they have extruding concrete that will build house. It's a real thing. They take it out to the job site and they have like a model for a house. It's very circular, the house, but like in, I don't know, it's like 14 hours or something, it prints a house that like people can live in. probably. It's like a 1-bedroom, you know, but it's like a legitimate house, and it even prints the plumbing and stuff.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Really?
it uses multi-material. It's amazing.
Wait, is it printed out of piping?
Yeah, it changes material.
With metal?
So anymore, kind of the fancier the printer gets, the more different materials it can print. It can do different things at the same time. So we're going to be getting this thing called the Palette 2S that allows you to do 4 different filaments, either colors if you want to be cheap about it, or you can do different kinds of material. So like for instance, what you can do, and the simple thing with the palette is you can like, all their example videos has them printing out a globe, the earth. And then you can go in and you can paint it with up to 4 colors. You can say, okay, I want this to be blue, with all the water blue. I want the land to be this color, the ice to be white, you know. So, and then you print it out. And what it does is, so the palette takes in 4 filaments and then it extrudes a single filament that goes to your printer. And it does all the magic of when it needs to splice the new filament in to get the new color. It is fairly wasteful though, because what it does is over next to your print, it kind of prints up this like waste block to get colors out as it transitions. That way you don't have like this weird mix in your print. But if you really cared about the different colors like that, you know, that could be beneficial and you didn't want to paint. I mean, I think at some point painting just makes more sense, but with different materials and you wanted to have different parts made of different material, then that I think makes more sense, where you can print the plumbing out of like PVC inside of the house where the exterior walls are made of concrete, for example. You know, that type of thing. I think it's just going to get more and more advanced where they'll just show up on a work site and print a house. Why not? You know, it's just kind of just amazing when you start, and that's the whole thing with our makerspace, and I'm excited to get everybody in there and start getting trained. I think we're close. Certainly within the next couple of weeks. I know I've said that a couple times now, but I mean, we're legitimately close now, because as you start getting exposed to these tools, you start then being allowed to dream about what can I do with these tools. You know, just like software here, you know, those of you who are doing CU Launch, a lot of times you're thinking about, I'm going to have an app that does something, because you're getting exposed to computer software. And this is what I can build with that. Well, what can you build with plastics and this idea of I have a shape in mind and I've designed that shape and now I want to bring it into reality and see if it fits. You know, that type of thing. It's just kind of an amazing type thing. But because yeah, with the new printer we have that can do 20 inch by 20 inch by 20 inch, we could print like a, as an example, like a stormtrooper helmet in one piece. Like you print out the whole helmet and just put it on, and now you have like part of a costume, as opposed to having on smaller printers, you have to print that in like probably 4 pieces and glue them together. Now you don't have to use glue. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, so are you saying like when you do that, it's like different, with like printed with like the different color details and stuff like that?
Well, you probably wouldn't. You probably, if you had your choice, you would probably print a stormtrooper helmet out of white filament. So it started off as a base white, and then you'd paint in the black parts. I don't really think there's much other than that. Maybe there's a couple of silvery pieces in there or something, but generally it's 90% white with a couple of black parts. So you just paint the black. Or you use whatever filament you have available, and then either you're just the custom stormtrooper. But the other thing that Palette 2 does that's kind of neat is, which is I think more practical and easy, is it allows you to just hook 4 filaments up to it, and then you could just put it on randomize, and it'll just randomly switch the colors. So you can just print out rainbow things, or more effectively, if you have 2 full rolls of filament and then you have 2 like almost empty rolls, you can burn through those 2 almost empty rolls by having it go through there, and it'll detect when they empty out, so it'll take it out of the rotation for randomizing. So you've at least used all your plastic. You know, because a lot of things you're printing, it's not about look, it's about function. So it doesn't necessarily matter if the thing you're building has, you know, 7 layers of pink in it. You know, it's better than tossing the pink plastic into the garbage can or something.
Is there any way to mix the filament
Yeah.
with
Well,
stuff like that, like to combine colors and like make?
well, that's what I'm just talking about.
No,
That's
like
what the palette thing does.
no, like melt.
Oh, you mean like
actually,
take blue and yellow and do something
Yeah.
else with it? Okay. Well, probably. I mean, you'll definitely get the color, but I don't know that you can get a real great consistent
yeah.
thing with that. You'd probably. There's another company right now that what they do is they take a clear filament and then they have a bunch of. I think it's some kind of dye that they inject into the filament as it's extruding to effectively update the colors in real time.
Oh, that's good.
So I think that would do something like that. But kind of neat stuff. But yeah, so we're going to start off. We're going to build this enclosure. Then we're going to build a bigger printer that can build bigger things, and we'll use that printer to build bigger things. And eventually,
We'll take over the world.
well, at least build an even bigger thing. Build a garage for your car. We're literally just out there and we measure your car and just build an enclosure around it.
Go in the parking lot. Everybody has garages.
The whole Concordia parking lot just has 3D printed garages around.
That'd be amazing.
It's, what it is it's a lot of plastic.
Yeah.
Well, we've been getting plastic super cheap. Usually they consider like a 1 kilogram roll of PLA. The cheap kind is like $20. And then you get the name brand. It's like $30-40 for like the better stuff. I'm getting these rolls at like $10 a pop from, I don't even know what country they're coming from. Like, I got 25 rolls, 25 1 kilogram rolls of black filament coming in like tomorrow.
From China.
So
It's all like toxic chemical.
It's like, no, that's security. Yes, tiny security.
seems like the same stuff as the expensive stuff we're using.
Tiny security.
All right, so let's write this. So we built our interface last time, right? And let me do this. Actually, the best way to do it is that. All right, so we built our beautiful interface last time, right? And did we already name these guys? So this is, no, these are all called edit texts and blah, blah, blah. So we're going to call this guy input num 1, ET, for input numerator 1 edit text. This is going to be input num 2 ET, input denom 1 ET, input denom 2 ET, and then we'll have our answer, and these guys are text views. So we'll have output num TV and output, well, I actually have denominator answer there, but whatever. Output denom TV. All right, so those are going to be the pieces that we have access to. So what I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go into main activity, and I'm going to give myself access to all of those guys. And I'm going to take a little bit different approach than I've shown you at this point, because it's potentially possible that I'm going to need access to those more than one time. We probably don't want to have every single time you click the button, you ask the activity to go and find those by ID again. We might want to use them over and over and over again. And even though it's not a big deal to have it go and look it up, because, you know, the computer is going to do whatever we tell it to do and it's fast, you know, maybe we go ahead and make these guys global variables, almost fields, well, they are fields, of this particular object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some fields of type edit text. And for our edit text, we're going to have input num 1 ET, input num 2 ET, input denom1 et input denom2 et. So those are my edit text. So you could actually define more than one variable in a single line. I have 4 variables here, all of type edit text. They don't have values yet, but I do have 4 variables defined. Similarly, I can say text view, and we're going to say output num TV and output denom TV. So those are our 2 output things. And then what I'll do here is inside of onCreate, I'm going to go ahead and look these things up and set them equal to their variables. So now from that point forward, I have programmatic access to them throughout this activity. Make some sense? Okay, because these fields up here, the scope of those fields is anywhere from this point forward inside of main activity. So that means I have access to them inside of onCreate. I have access to them inside of onClickMe button pressed. So I'll go ahead and set them up in here. So I'll say this dot input num1 et is equal to this dot find view by id r.id dot input num1 et, and I'll just steal this line, and we'll do denom1 this is denom1 et. Paste again. This is num2 et. This is num2 et. And then this is denom2. And this is denom2. All right, so that gets me my edit texts. And then I'll go ahead and get my output text views. So I'll say this dot output num TV is equal to this dot find view by id r.id dot output num TV. This dot output denom TV is equal to this dot find view by id r.id dot output denom TV. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Now, who is this in this context? Who does this actually refer to exactly in this context?
Input num2
Just what I have highlighted there. Who is this?
Just the output.
That instance of uncreate.
Uncreate's a function.
That
Who owns that function?
Yes.
activity.
And who is this?
would be the class.
It's an instance, in this case, specifically of main activity. So this right here, this guy is this particular instance of main activity. So we are asking this instance of main activity to look within himself and find a view given an ID. What ID? r.id.input name et. Now, input name et, well, here, let's just highlight all of this. id.input name et, is that a field or a method? Follow-up is going to be why. This is all first 8-week stuff. Field or method? It's field. How do you know? No parentheses. Got it. Class field or instance field? Remember, we're looking at this, how this is being used, not how it's being defined, how it's being used. Is this guy a class field or an instance field? Class field. How do you know?
The R is the class.
Okay, why do you strongly suspect that R is a class? Capitalized. Okay, so R is the guy who's calling this. He's capitalized, probably the name of a class. So this is saying R dot, we have an ID here, which is a, more than likely, this is actually a something that knows how to call this guy. So this actually might be an instance here. So input num1 et might be an instance field being called by this instance of ID being called by this class called R. But I'm just treating it as the whole pod here just for the second. I could say r.id. This guy is a, oh, actually, he's a class. ID is a class, just a bad naming convention. So there's an example of a class that they did not capitalize. So you can't necessarily guarantee that something that's lowercase is an instance, but you can strongly suspect. All right, and then your stuff in there, like our input, these guys, notice these are all just integers. So it's some sort of unique number that was assigned to that widget, and it's just an int. So that means what's our maximum number of widgets we can have on a screen in an Android application? Because right here, each widget is given a unique identifier, right? And that unique identifier is of type int. How many unique integers are there in Java? It's actually a pretty good answer. There is a lot. Okay.
At
There
least
is a lot
one.
of them.
More specifically, how many integers are 32-bit signed numbers? And we're seeing examples here. They're actually using negative values there for some of these. So they're using the whole rigmarole, right? So we have 2 to the 31st, or 2 to the 32nd, rather, unique values. So 4.2 billion-ish unique representations of an int that we can fit inside of 32 bits. And that's how many widgets. So what does that tell you? Don't make your interfaces overly complicated. You know, keep your number of widgets under 4.2 billion.
Shouldn't be too hard. I don't think.
Well, I don't know. I make some pretty bad interfaces.
What's the worst interface you ever created?
Well, actually, it's a funny story you ask. And it'll be a story of why you should learn coding. D20 gaming dice. Let's find my... We'll just put app after it. There it is. See this interface right here?
That's yours?
That's my very first app on the Apple App Store when it went live. That app was up there the day the App Store went live. What grade would you give that interface?
For its time or for now?
Huh?
For the time or for now?
Either. Doesn't matter. That'll tell you how much I made off of it.
Solid C minus.
C minus? Solid C minus?
Solid C minus.
Okay. That's probably being generous, right? Pretty crappy interface. Was playing Dungeons and Dragons with some students, and I needed an app to write for the first my first app on the App Store. I had 4 apps on the App Store the first day, but this is one of them. And this is what it looked like. Spent about 10 hours writing this app the first time, teaching myself Objective-C. How much do you think I made off that app?
Did you have ads on there or was it paid?
No ads, just 100% paid.
4,000?
Keep in mind, it was available day one of the App Store. Sold it for, I had 90, this one was 99 cents, and there was a pro version. It'll let you do things like 2d6 plus 4.
Oof.
Program, you get a better interface.
That was $1.99. I'll give you 3 guesses,
When did the
and they're all going to be too low.
when was the official release of the App Store?
11 years ago?
11 years.
8,000?
We're making million a thousand.
I think I know the answer, so I'm not gonna say it.
It'd be
Go ahead.
60 grand.
More?
60 grand.
Way more. Early day of the App Store, everybody bought every app. This was the newest thing.
Millions?
This one app made over $3 million.
Holy shoot.
Now, what would this app make if I released on the App Store today?
0?
Apple wouldn't approve it, right? This doesn't meet in fact, they've actually kicked it off the App Store now because it doesn't meet their aesthetic standards. Because I spent 10 hours on this once. Never touched it again.
3 million.
10 hours one time. I mean, now I use it as examples in class when we do iOS stuff. We write a dice roller. So that exact same app that at one point in time, if your timing was right, would have, I mean, there's nothing special about the app. It was good timing, right?
Yeah.
I had probably had grandmas downloading the app for no good reason. Otherwise, well, it's an app. I should download it. I don't even know what it does. What does a dice roller do? And that wasn't even my highest paying app. I had the first two real-time stock quote applications on the App Store, Quotes RT and Portfolio RT. Ended up getting a cease and desist about a year later from Dow Jones and the NASDAQ when they finally decided, oh, we can make money off the App Store. You're using data that we didn't sell you. We want a piece.
It got so bye-bye.
Well, but at that point, the banks were coming onto the App Store. The first year of the App Store, we didn't know how popular it was going to be, right? But now everybody's on the App Store. E-Trade, all the banks. I can't compete with them anyways. But I was selling Quotes RT for $9. So that gave you can keep track of all 3 indexes and then 1 stock of your choice from real time. And it just destroyed your battery life. It was terrible. And then the other one was you can keep your whole portfolio in there. And you could just use your imagination. It was somewhat significantly north of the other one. But that's all timing, right? Computer programming from a perspective is a superpower. Then you couple that with entrepreneurship, which is the whole thing with CU Launch. And now you can, if you use that superpower with the right timing for the right idea, you can build companies that do something, right? If I wrote that identical app today, it would be laughed off the App Store, right? It's a garbage app. It doesn't do anything. There's plenty of free dice rollers out there today. But because I had it on the App Store the day the store went live, you had all these people who'd already had iPhones for a year, and now all of a sudden they get the new software and the new iPhone, the iPhone 3G had just come out, and everybody's downloading every app because, oh my gosh, there's an App Store. It was the first App Store. It's something we take for granted today, but back then it was...
How many apps were available on the first day?
I don't know, maybe 40 or 50?
Wow, and you were one of those.
I was 4 of those.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I had just gone to WWDC in San Francisco and gave myself a crash course in Objective-C. And what did I do? I sat down, I said, how do I define variables? How do I ask questions? How do I do repetition?
You're able to create something that was worth.
And then you learn the language, and the rest is history, right?
Amazing.
And this had nothing to do with any one of you in here now. Actually, it's a true statement. This is a text view. This is a button. This is a text view. We could write this app
Yes.
with what we've learned in a week, right?
Right.
So, get good at programming. Go ahead.
Is the dice that you have on the side, are those basically those image buttons I keep on seeing when I look?
Yeah, in fact, this was probably the image I stole it from.
Stole it from.
Yeah, I just did this and cut it up. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I violated some kind of like free use. I don't know. It's entirely possible that I didn't violate it. It might have been that this was freely available, but I didn't check. Same thing with my my Quotes RT app. If you go to finance.google.com, and let's say I click on Apple, this thing up here is a actually it looks like they defend against it now. Oh no, here's the Apple. I can build this whole URL and just put in the name of the stock that they're searching for, and then I can pull out the current price of the stock every 3 seconds, something like that. There you go, real-time stock quote application.
That's really cool.
And that's data science. That's saying, hey, I have a whole, because what does this page look like? This page looks like, view page source, it looks like a whole bunch of garbage, right? But somewhere in there, you have the price of Apple. You have the name of the ticker, and you have the current price. Go through, pull those 2 pieces out, throw them on text views, boom. You have real-time stock quote.
Nailed it.
So, again, These are skills that now we look at in here. These aren't amazing skills, right? These are easy. I mean, once I taught you, if I had you read this thing in as a string, we've done string manipulation stuff before. Search through a string, find a certain pattern, find where the plus sign is, remove spaces, that kind of stuff. So if I taught you how to do a URL connection to go ahead and grab the contents of a website, the giant HTML string, and I said, okay, now take that string and look for AAPL in it. So if I come in here and I look for AAPL, there's the Apple, so it's there 37 times, and I just start walking through until I find the one that's next to the price. And as soon as I find the one that's next to the price, then I can look for what's going on right around that so I can find that pattern. So whatever, we don't have to go and do that now, but eventually I'll get to one that's next to the dollar amount. I'll say, oh, right before that, there is a roll equals double quote, for example. So I'll get to the index of Apple, the 37th version of that, and then go forward until I find roll equals double quote, and I know the next thing after that, until I reach the next double quote, is my price. Build up that string. Throw it on text view. Make sense? So programming is a superpower, and if you can leverage it, you can start doing these things. There's nothing special about the idea. What was special about it was the timing, right? So Angry Birds, nothing special about the idea. There's plenty of apps now that kind of that look similar to Angry Birds and Flappy Birds and the different apps that have been these huge successes before, but they were the first ones to do it. And that's where the entrepreneurial stuff comes from. That's where the CU launch stuff comes from, where we want to encourage you to have a business-minded approach to your vocation. Now, not everybody is necessarily business-minded. Not everybody sits around and dreams about starting a business or creating a product. What's nice about software is you don't actually have to create a business to play on the App Store. I happen to have a business where we write apps and things like that, but I did this just as me. Nothing keeps you from paying Apple $100 a year to put as many apps as you want on the App Store and going and writing apps and seeing what happens. You only need to make $100 to break even, right? And worst that happens, you have this portfolio of apps you put out there in the App Store, and you at least say, I made those. People don't have to know you sold 2 copies and they were both free keys you gave to your grandparents. That's not important. It's you building up that portfolio, something you can go and show somebody else that you did. That make some sense? So take the programming seriously, and whether you use it to do stuff like this or you use it to go and write software that changes the world in some other way, or you go and work for a company like Acuity or Tesh Global and you help them solve some world problem. You're still putting that to some use, right? On one hand, you're creating a business and hoping you get paid. On another hand, they're offering you money and they hope they make money off of you. They say, hey, here's your 60 grand a year. Now go make me 100 grand a year. So on one hand, you're saying, well, I don't have to solve the problem of making 100. I can just solve the problem of showing up to work, doing my job well, and cashing my checks. Some people like that. They don't want the pressure of having to pay employees and having to deal with business taxes and all that other stuff. Other people find that exciting. But at the core of both of that is computer programming as a skill set. Make some sense? So hopefully that reinvigorates some of you who have, in your mind, decided that that programming, it's just not my thing. Because there's a pretty drastic pay scale difference between getting a job as a coder versus getting a job in tech as like an IT professional or something like that. That doesn't mean that we don't need techs. In fact, I would even make the argument that people who are IT professionals are underpaid. Because we really do rely on them to keep our infrastructure alive, but starting salary right out of school for IT is maybe, let's say, 45. Starting salary right out of school for CS is 65, let's say. It's a pretty substantial difference for the day you walk out of. That doesn't mean do it for the money. You got to do what you're passionate about. Let the money take care of itself. But programming is something you find palatable at some level. It's a skill set worth having, and I think it's going to be a skill set people are going to have moving forward. All right. So again, as I build my interfaces, I've proven to you now I'm an expert interface builder. I have a proven track record on the App Store. Some of the apps that I've made money off of, you guys would laugh so hard. In the early days, I wrote one with my wife that was for tracking the female cycle. And that did less well, but pretty well. But that was her idea, and we wrote it together, and it was an interesting app. And we had a bunch of stupid little games and stuff, but only those 4 were like crazy successful. You know, other apps I maybe made $5,000 here or $1,500 there, stuff like that. Just those 4, because they were out on the App Store day one, generated money that was disproportionate to the quality of the app. All right, so back to this. Inside of OnCreate, what am I doing? I'm giving myself programmatic access to my widgets, MVC, right? I'm giving myself programmatic access to the rest of my widgets, MVC. So these are my edit text, these are my text views. We've decided that in here, this refers to this particular instance of main activity. So it is this instance of main activity that is searching within himself for a widget with that ID. And he's returning that widget to me, and I'm storing it inside of this variable, which is of type edit text. Make sense what's happening there? This is nothing abnormal. This is nothing different than we've done all along. We made fractions before. We said fraction f is equal to new fraction. If I were to print out the value of input num1 et, we would see that this guy is a, in fact, here, we'll just run this real quick. I'll say this dot output, we'll just put it in denom set text, and we're going to set the text to this dot num1 et dot toString. Okay, I'll go ahead and run this. And there is, oh, it's kind of going off the screen there some, but I promise you, if we keep going down here, it'll look like the crazy memory addressy looking thing. Something we've seen for weeks, right? Okay, this is nothing new. This is the pointer that gets put inside of this object. Make sense? All right, so I have access to my stuff now. What do we do with that stuff? Well, down here, when somebody clicks the button, we need to build a couple of fractions. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, I'm going to give myself my numerator and denominator for both of them in just integer form so I can keep this a little cleaner. So I would say int num1. This guy is going to be equal to this dot input num1 et dot get text. That gives me something in the form of an editable. I'll convert that to a string. Now, I have a string, but I want to store it as a number. How do I convert a string representation of a number into an actual number? Integer.parseInt. So that's my tool from Home Depot that knows how to juice a string representation of a number into a int. If I didn't remember that, I could have written my own, right? And then we have written our own before. Int num2 is equal to integer. You know what? Let me just copy this for speed since we went off on our story tangent. And I'm going to get num2 et Then we're going to say int denom1 is equal to denom1 et, and then denom2 is denom2 et. Okay, so now I have my my two numerators, my two denominators, both as numbers. Now I can go ahead and build fractions. Just to remind us, in a fraction, we have these guys. Our fraction takes in, well, we take in two longs, but an int will convert to a long. It'll work out. So I have to give it a numerator and a denominator, and he'll build me a fraction. No problem. So I'm going to go and use that tool. I'm going to build a couple of fractions. Say fraction f1 is equal to a new fraction, num1, denom1. There's my first fraction. Fraction f2 is equal to new fraction, num2, denom2. There's my second fraction. Fraction answer is equal to f1 dot add f2. There's my solution. This dot output num is equal to answer dot numerator. Sorry, that's a number, right? So dot set text answer dot numerator. So now that guy is a number. How do I turn a number into a string, since set text requires a string? Well, it's a number. It's an int primitive. Tell me about primitive types. What do primitive types? What's the definition of a primitive type? Built into the language and only holds a value. Therefore, two strings not in the cards. Calling functions on something that only holds a value is not a thing. How do I convert a primitive type into a string? Empty string concatenated with the number. Now you got a string representation of the number.
Sweet.
Go ahead.
So above, when you were defining the ints of like num1 and num1, integer is a class and parse int is a method in that class?
Correct. What kind of method is it? Class method or instance method?
Class method.
Class method. This integer is likely a class name, right? With the capital I. We've looked at integer.parseInt before, haven't we? Yeah.
My ideas are not.
No, but that's good. That's why we practice this, right? This is why we do this. But even if you didn't remember this, even if you didn't remember integer.parseInt, you could have gone back and either looked at your old code or written the thing that converts the string version, base to decimal, right? Where you pass in a string representation of a base 10 number and convert it to decimal, and it'll work, right? It'll give you the decimal version of it. Go ahead.
Would we have to reduce this, or does it automatically?
I think my add automatically reduces it, but I don't remember for sure. Let's just take a quick peek. Does not look like he reduces it, so I would have to then reduce it. But let's get it on the screen unreduced first, and then we'll reduce it, right? All right, so I should have my output numerator set to, this is a number, concatenated onto the empty string. Now he's a string. Remember way back when I said Java's a string-based language and strings are very malleable, so if I can get something into string format, I can do almost anything with it. Right here we're seeing sucking an int out of a string, putting an int back into a string. This dot output denom set text equal to the empty string concatenated with answer dot denominator. So this should give us now a functional but non-reduced solution to our problem. So if I say 1/2 and I say 1/4 and I say add fractions, there's my 6/8. If I want to reduce it, I remind myself inside a fraction, we have something called reduce Euclidean that goes in and internally updates that fraction's values. He returns nothing. So I'll just ask my answer fraction to reduce Euclidean. And now I'll get the reduced version of it. 1/2, 1/4, add fractions, there's 3/4. Go ahead.
So you said that when you and I were talking earlier that like everything in that Android Studio shouldn't change like the way that we program in Java.
Not at all.
So can we use the set text in normal Java programming too, or is that something that's Android Studio specific?
Well, set text is something that belongs to output num TV, and what's output num TV? It's something called text view.
So
Text view came with Android.
Okay, so that's
It's a widget that's part of Android. It's nothing to do with Android Studio. It's just replace
It's
text view
Android.
with my made up object.
okay.
And my made up object happens to have something called set text.
Just
Just like our made up fraction has something called reduce Euclidean.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You called text view a widget. Is
Yeah, so if I come out here, I refer to any of these things like this is a widget, this is a widget, this is a widget. Things that appear on the screen, they're widgets or views. I tend to call them widgets, but
so we couldn't call them classes.
well, this guy is the visual representation of a class. The reason I wouldn't call it a class necessarily, it's not incorrect to call it a class, is I want to differentiate it from the things we build our visual interfaces with versus the things that are just like fraction is not a widget. Fraction and text view are both classes, but fraction doesn't have a widget front end. So I would I wouldn't put him in the widget category, where all widgets do have a class behind it because that's how MVC is implemented, right? So we have the visual representation of a text view, and then we have the programmatic representation of a text view, which is a text view class. Yeah.
So right now we're just able to just call a fraction just because we have another the fraction class made in the folder. When would we get to the point where we have to import it? Would it be if it's across different files? I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, like for instance, if we come back here to main activity, we're seeing let's pretend like we wrote text view or we wrote edit text, and those guys actually live in other packages, and this is where I'm getting that widget thing from. Okay, so somebody at Google wrote a package called Android, and inside that they have a package called widget, and inside that they have a class called edit text. And because I'm operating in the world that is housed inside of com.example.hello world Android test, which was invented by Android Studio when I just hit finish and I created my new project, it gave me that folder, that's where I live. So anything that's not in that folder lives in another package, I would have to import it. So in order to get app compat activity, this guy lives in androidx.appcompat.app.appcompat activity. Now, I didn't actually put this line in here because my default Android application came with this class called main activity, which extended app compat activity. But that app compat activity actually lives in this package. So it needed to be imported to have access to it. Go ahead.
So basically, everything, since fraction will be underneath the same package, if we were to create a new package and do stuff like that, if we wanted to use fraction, we'd have to import the com.example.hello world Android test.
No, because it's a package. It's in our scope.
Okay, so
Yeah, it's
a
underneath
package,
us.
so
Yeah, so since even though it's a package, if it lives under us, we have rule over it.
Got it.
Now, if we were inside of fraction and wanted to access something that was higher up in our own package, we would need to import it. Because we wouldn't necessarily have, because we would be inside of package com.example.hello world Android tests math stuff. And we have fraction and math stuff. Well, if from that, we actually needed something that was a level up, or even maybe a level up, and then we had another package called string stuff.
Okay.
Inside math stuff, we don't have access to string stuff.
Okay.
So we would need to then import that to
Okay.
get access. But it works a lot like scoping rules for variables.
Okay.
Yeah.
So importing widgets should be looked at exactly the same as like when we're importing one of the power tools that Java already has. So like
It is the same.
Okay.
100% the same. It doesn't matter that this guy has a visual representation on the screen.
That's just
That's a
importing-
class. He lives here. And here, there is not here. So I need to import it to have access to it.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, nothing special about him. It just so happens that he has a visual representation in an Android application. Make some sense? All right, so this is a working version of our app. Is that what it was supposed to do? Okay. Questions about that? Okay, and you see how we've drilled those. So the last couple classes I've been talking about this idea of kind of drilling kind of primitive go-to moves in Android. Here's a widget, here's some code, make those guys relate to each other so I can programmatically make something happen with the widget. Okay, so we did that a bunch of times in here, right? We had, 4 numerator, denominator input stuff. Those were our edit text. How do I bring user input into my code? Then I had 2 text views that I also needed to have logic associated with it for writing stuff back out. But notice I also had a couple of text views here. I had this guy and this guy right here that were just for show. That plus sign, we never interacted with it again after I put it on the screen, just to show that what I'm intending to do here is add this guy plus this guy. So he's a text view that had a name. Well, I called it plus sign here, right? But I mainly called it plus sign so that over here on my component tree, I would see it if everything was compacted down. We see that underneath my data entry horizontal linear layout, I have my first fraction followed by a plus sign followed by my second fraction. And then if I happen to expand that, I see that my fraction is actually a vertical linear layout, which has 2 input texts, or edit text rather. So naming convention just to make that look a little prettier, but it would have been completely acceptable to give this guy some random name and to give this guy some random name, because I'm never going to actually programmatically interface with them. They're just for show to make my interface look amazing. Go ahead.
I had another question in Java code. So we know when you were connecting stuff, you said R is a class, right?
Yep.
And is ID both its own class and an instance of the R class?
Not in an instance of the R class. It's its own class in the class called. So it would be a static field. Because I call it by saying R dot. So here, let's just put it in a keynote real quick. I can draw a quick picture. So the class R, which is generated by Android. We're not in charge of that. That's part of how Android accomplishes its MVC, right? They say, look, we're going to create this magical R class, and you're going to use that guy to glue interface to code. All right, so that guy's generated for us. Now, inside of there's going to be a field called static. Here, I'll just actually give you the correct class type, so we're accurate. So this guy is r.id, and that guy is the name of the class is actually ID. Okay. So there exists a static variable in here of type ID called ID. R dot. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
Could you relate this abstractly, in terms of a chair object, how?
Yeah,
you are-
right. So I'll do that here. Okay, so that's what this guy looks like.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we might do here is we might have a, let's see. All right. So we have a chair, and a chair is made of wood legs, right? All right, so maybe inside of that we have a static wood leg 1, static wood leg 2, static wood leg 3, static wood leg 4. All right, and then maybe inside here, maybe that class ends up having some sort of initializer where leg 1 ends up having its length. So we might have like leg 1 dot length is equal to 5. So this would be chair dot leg 1 dot length is equal to 5. Leg 2 is equal to 5, leg 3 is equal to 5, and leg 4 is equal to 3 because it's funny. This chair's a little wobbly. It's got one shorter leg. Yeah. All right, so, all right. But the point is that leg 1, leg 2, leg 3, leg 4, these guys are all fields of type wood, but they are class fields because they'll have static in front of them. So the way I access leg 3 is by saying the name of the class, chair, dot leg 3, dot length.
And you're saying in the case of R, we would do r.id.id, so it's like static. Wood and leg would both be ID and ID. They just named it confusingly.
Correct. Yeah. They name the type and the variable name the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like an int variable.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. But in this case, it wasn't a built into the language. It was a class they made. But yeah. So the idea is this was generated for us, and inside of the R class. In fact, you know what? Let's just go and do this. Yeah, here's the generated stuff. Oh, can I not get that far down? All right, I'm going to show this in Finder. Here, reveal in Finder. Oh, it must be inside of that guy, this build config. Nope. Where is my R? Side of Gradle scripts. Let's see what's hidden from us here. I promise you there's a class in here called R. We can look in there. All right, so this is our app folder. Source should have our stuff in it. Oh, I think it is going to be in this resource folder here. Will it be inside of layout? Nope, not there. Not there. Maybe in build, generated, app generated sources, debug, out. All right, that wasn't helpful. Not named R class sources. Ah, found it. R.Java. All right, so that was in there. All right, so we see that this guy is. Can I get rid of this welcome thing? There we go.
Oh,
So here's class R. Oh my God! Oh, yeah, that is an unfortunate. The letter I and D right next to each other is a yeah.
That means
I think it's final class ID. There we go. So here's our final class called ID. So this is kind of where the naming convention for this, it's instead of being it weirdly done, they actually didn't have to give it a variable name since it's inside of R. They defined it as a final class, which means it doesn't change, it can't change. So to your question, Sarah, they actually didn't name it confusingly. They named it ID, but that's also the name of the class. But this class only exists to have static stuff inside of it, so you don't actually have a variable of that type. So they just put a class in here called of type final, which means it cannot change. It's hard-coded. It's done. The class name is ID, and you don't need a variable name because it's filled up with static stuff. ID dot alt, ID dot control, ID dot click me. So we're seeing all those values, and notice they're stored as hexadecimal values in here. These are all of our IDs, but here's our fraction answer. We should have an input thing somewhere. So inside of this here's my input num1 ET. That's something we invented, and we see that it got thrown into this file magically. All right, so inside of this r.java file, they've defined a class called ID. And it's filled with static stuff, so I don't need a variable named ID. I can just access that stuff through the name of the class, which is ID. But naming convention would have dictated that I would have called that ID like that. Because typically, class names start with an uppercase letter. Something like that. That make sense? Okay. So this is what R looks like. We see that it's a bunch of stuff is in here that we had nothing to do with, and there's a bunch of stuff that's in there that we didn't invent. But this guy gets generated for us whenever we change stuff. Go ahead.
So if ID is a class of final type, what was that final class? What's that class word?
We've seen class before. Here, I'll show it to you in our fraction. That's a class. Yeah, nothing special, nothing new. He's a class. Okay, so that's how we define objects. In this case, the Android folks defined an object called ID. That's a type class. They put final in front of it that says you're not allowed, as the end user, you're not allowed to change it. Because their intention is that this R class is like this off-limits class. Okay, don't screw with this because we're going to be changing this often automatically, and whatever changes you make are going to get overwritten. So by making it final, they're saying you're not even allowed to change it. You can't even try to change it. Make sense? Okay, so real quick, let me just close this so there isn't like any sort of weird, it's going to ask me if I want to save it. I'm going to say, oh, I changed it back. Okay, there. So now just real quickly to show you how to put this onto GitHub. Much, much, much nicer now. You're going to come up here to VCS, this is version control. So I'm inside of Android Studio. And we're going to say import into version control. And then we'll say share project on GitHub. All right, so the first time, well, this is actually good because I hadn't used it on this laptop yet. So it wants me to log into my GitHub account, so I'll go ahead and log in. And I believe that is my GitHub account. Incorrect credentials. Is it my email? It is. Okay. So you only have to do that the first time. You'll log in. And it's saying, okay, the repository name, I'm going to call this guy Fraction Adder Android. And you can hit the checkbox if you want it private or not. For all your homework assignments you submit, don't make it private because I won't be able to see it. So leave that unchecked. Leave all the rest of the stuff alone. You can put a description if you want. Just click share. It'll bring up the stuff for initial commit. Leave it alone. It does all of its stuff. Go ahead and click add. And there it is. It's up on GitHub.
So there's like so many files in that app. You'd only be looking at like the activity name and like XML name.
It does that for you. With the Git technology, there is something called a .ignore file. And the .ignore file is, you can set up profiles for different things, like Unity has one, Android Studio has one. It says, these are the files that actually differentiate the project. Here's all the crap that we generate at runtime. Let's not store that. That way it's only uploading, the 30 files or something like that are specific to your project. Everything else will run on its own. All right, that makes sense? All right, so for your homework, I'll come up with some sort of data entry type thing, but we're going to be creating a class to house information about something, whether it's employees or something like that, where we have a first name, a last name, maybe it's an age, some stuff like that. So you'll have to build an appropriate interface. You'll have to build an appropriate Java class. So it's going to be a class we haven't written yet before, but it'll be a simple class. And then you'll kind of have an output for what you just entered in down on the bottom. Just, again, practicing what we just did, but instead of using an old fraction thing that we wrote, I'm going to have you write a new simple class and practice with your interfaces. That make sense? And you'll submit this one with your GitHub link. Questions, comments, concerns, bribes? Is everybody reinvigorated about getting good at coding?
Yes.
Good, good, good. All right, I will see everybody on Tuesday.